and welcome everyone to today's session. Really looking forward to today's topic. We'll be talking about complexity. This is a topic that, as we enter the new year, has been on my mind, and it's on the mind of a lot of the leaders that I intersect with, and they're trying to figure out how to be focused on growth and become more efficient, and they're struggling with the complexity that's often embedded in their organizations. And so I'm really excited to tackle this alignment leader challenge and talk about some of the principles that we've seen that organizations and leaders have been able to address and drive some simplicity in their organization. Now, as was indicated, as we go through today's discussion, I like interaction. And it's difficult because we're muted, and so the best way to do that is by entering questions. You should see a panel that allows for questions to be submitted, and I encourage you to do that. I'll take pauses periodically to ask for questions, but also I'll look for questions as they come through and try to embed some answers or responses through our discussion today. So with that said, I want to give a little bit of a introduction to AlignOrg Solutions and the work that we do, because a lot of people may not be familiar with exactly what we are and who we work with. We do several things as an organization. We focus on helping organizations clarify their strategy. We help them diagnose their organizations to see whether those organizations are truly capable of delivering in the marketplace in a winning way. We do organization design and alignment work, of course, and then we try to help organizations facilitate the change that goes with that. Most of what we do is actually in the trenches with organizations as they're working through a transformation. In addition to that, however, we do some capability building, and we do that because we find that as practitioners and as leaders get stronger and more capable at driving organization transformation, they can be more effective, and they really appreciate the tools and methods that we share with folks. And we'll share some of those today as we go through our discussion. Now, as we have any interaction like this, I find that stories are sometimes the best way to learn. And so I'll do my best to share some stories. I popped this page up not to suggest that we've worked with any or all of these organizations, but more to suggest that we can learn from the stories of other organizations. Sometimes they've done some remarkably good things, and sometimes they've slipped up, and we can learn from the challenges that they've faced. And so I just share that as one of the techniques that we use through the process of today's webinar. So with that all said, let's dive in. What we'd like to cover today is really getting into what are the things that lead to complexity in organizations. There are some systemic underlying issues that, whether we mean to or not, are really contributing to complexity. The second thing is we want to try to get into the logic that leaders have that, whether they intentionally or unintentionally do this, is leading to the complexity that we're often fighting. And then finally, I'd like to highlight some of the design principles that can really help to lead to simpler organization designs. Now, if we do this well, hopefully you'll walk away with some insights on how we can design simpler organizations, and also how leaders and executives can really start to attack and overcome some of the unnecessary complexity that they may have inadvertently allowed to seep into their organizations. So that's where we're headed today, and we're gonna sort of dive straight in. Now, what I hope you're doing as we go through this discussion is you're kind of putting your own thinking cap on and saying, how do these concepts and ideas relate to my own organization? So one of the questions I want to pose, and this is a little bit more difficult to do because of the format we're in, but I'd like you to think for just a minute, and if it's appropriate to jot it into the question line of our platform here. I'd love to hear what some of the issues are that are driving complexity in your organizations. But some of the common ones we see are geographic expansion. So, easy, straightforward when we're regional or when we're in one particular country. But as soon as we go global, or as soon as we broaden to multi-regions, it becomes complex. Certainly, product service extension can add complexity. Whenever we move from just a simple product or service to a full solution or a full experience as part of what we're trying to sell, that adds complexity. New competitors, mergers and acquisitions, and of course regulatory changes are some of the usual suspects. So again, really appreciate folks starting to pile in. I see some folks responding with products and service extensions, merger and acquisitions going on, geographic expansion. So here they keep coming. More M&A. Yeah, geographic expansion, and some of these I have to expand, and product to service extension. So regulatory changes. That must be either healthcare or financial services, but I'm guessing. Yeah, there's another one coming in around health plan requirements. So thank you for your responses on that. If you have something that fits the other category, by all means chime in with that. But we are certainly feeling all of these aspects coming forward. Now, as we start to think about what's driving it, I do want to bring to your attention our book, Mastering the Cube. Mostly, I want to bring this forward because one of the things we tried to share in the book were the building blocks of how to create a more effective organization. And so as we tackle the subject of complexity today, we want to sort of build off of what are some of the things that great, tried and true organizations build off of so that they have a sure, solid, strategically differentiating foundation, but are also able to avoid some of the common, trip-ups and complexity. Now, on this page, I've highlighted all of the building blocks and all of the stumbling blocks that we cover in the entire book. We don't have time to cover all of that today, but I did want to zero in on one of the building blocks and one of the stumbling blocks, and you see it there. It's number 7. One of the building blocks of a great organization design is thinking about how the organization is set up to absorb the complexity of the market and of the customer and of the organization. Because sometimes we very simplistically, and this is the stumbling block, we simplistically assume that if we make a promise to the market or to the customer, that our organization can very easily and smoothly adjust and adapt to that complexity. And let me just say, it's not always that simple. So we really want to dive into this notion. Now, coming out of the book, one of the analogies that the whole book is based on is this notion that an organization is sort of like a Rubik's Cube. And I think many of you may be able to very quickly make the leap between why an organization and why a Rubik's Cube have some similarities. But the primary reason that I want to highlight it today is because of the number you see there. On a typical Rubik's Cube, which has 9 little tiles for each of the 6 sides, that's really conceivably 54 unique different, tiles or sides on the Rubik's Cube. You can get over 43 quintillion possible combinations. Now, if you think about a typical organization, and if each side of the Rubik's Cube represented a dimension of an organization, how we do our work, or how we're structured, or our metrics, or our talent, or our culture, and so forth, there are countless variables that would go into any one of those particular dimensions. And if you started to look at all the possible configurations in an organization, it would be almost infinite. And so one of the reasons I want to bring this forward is because whenever there's a change in the marketplace, as you can see over on the far left-hand side, it usually demands that the organization make some kind of change or adjustment in its strategy in response to that. As soon as we commit to making a strategic change, 2 other things have to follow. One, we have to change the capabilities in the organization. You might think capabilities mean skill sets. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about sort of the strategic muscles of the company, the ability to maximize supply chain, or the ability to win on data and analytics, or the ability to lead in product. Whatever that capability or muscle is, that usually has to exist in order to win on the strategy that's been chosen. And then the third component is making sure that we get all of the other organizing choices in the organization lined up to support those capabilities, those muscles, which are all in service of driving a strategy that hopefully meets the needs of the market. And if we do that right, we get the right results. And so one of the taglines that we often share is that organizations are perfectly designed to get the results they're getting. And so when we want different results, we should be instilling some kind of change in our choices, in our capabilities, and sometimes in our strategies. Now, this is the root of complexity in most organizations, because sometimes in our respective departments or our respective businesses, we think that a small, modest, minor change is isolated, but in reality, it's connected to everything else. So what we'd like to do now is kind of dive into a couple of principles that can help us kind of uncover the way in which we address complexity. Now, the page I've just put up here is really a blowout of the page we were just looking at, and it sort of shows that as you go from your strategy into the muscles or capabilities and into the deeper choices of the organization, we're using the Rubik's Cube analogy to say, what are all the different things that are contributing to the outcome and contribute to the results? And so that's the root of complexity. And whenever we think about complexity, it's always good to hearken back to a framework. And this is the framework that we try to anchor all of those assessments to.